What would happen if one of the largest economies in the world stopped using the dollar in its international transactions? China is already actively working on this issue, gradually reducing its dependence on the American currency. But can the yuan fully replace the dollar and euro on the global stage? Want to learn more about how China is promoting its currency and how this could change the global financial market? Stay with me so you don't miss the details. About China's national currency. China is taking serious steps towards the internationalization of the yuan. And every month, new achievements come up in this process. For the first time in history, the yuan has surpassed the dollar in usage for China's cross-border trade, and this is just the beginning. But can we already talk about China completely freeing itself from dependence on the American currency? Or will the dollar and euro remain important players on the world stage for many years to come? China has managed to significantly reduce its dependence on the dollar, taking important steps in that direction. In recent years, the country has been actively working to expand the use of its national currency, the yuan, in international settlements and foreign trade. In particular, China is entering into bilateral agreements with various countries that allow for trade operations without using the dollar. This is especially noticeable in relations with major trading partners like Russia, Southeast Asian countries, and the Middle East, which are also looking to reduce their dependence on the dollar. In addition, China is actively developing international investments aimed at using the yuan, and is also promoting the Belt and Road Initiative, which encourages the use of the Chinese currency in major infrastructure projects. All of this allows China to gradually reduce the influence of the American currency on its economy. The yuan has surpassed the dollar for the first time. However, according to Bian Yinshu, a visiting scholar from Yale University, it's still too early to talk about China completely abandoning the dollar. Despite all the efforts, the dollar continues to play a key role in many international transactions. And its use remains dominant in global financial operations. In the short term, according to the expert, the dollar will maintain its significance in China's foreign trade and investments. The process of switching to alternative currencies like the yuan will take more time and will require further strengthening of international trust in the Chinese currency. Earlier, Chinese media, citing data from the State Administration of Foreign Exchange of China, reported on an important event. In March, the yuan surpassed the dollar for the first time in terms of usage in China's cross-border trade. The yuan was used in 48.4% of all cross-border operations, while the dollar's share was 46.7%. By May, the gap between the currencies continued to widen. The share of the yuan reached 49.6%, while the dollar dropped to 45.2%. These data indicate that China is actively promoting its currency in international trade, gradually reducing its dependence on the American currency. The reason for the decline in the influence of the dollar and euro is that they are gradually losing their grip on international financial markets, which is linked to the recent rise in interest rates in the US and Europe. The rise in interest rates has made these currencies less accessible for other countries, as their value has increased and it has become harder to obtain enough dollars and euros for trade and financial operations. This has led many countries to start looking for alternative ways to settle payments in international trade. In such conditions, countries like Brazil, Russia, India, and Iran have started to more actively use their national currencies for trade operations. This means that instead of settling in dollars or euros, they are increasingly using their local currencies for mutual transactions. This process is called passive de-dollarization and de-euroization. Interesting, what does that mean? Passive de-dollarization and de-euroization. Passive de-dollarization and de-euroization is the process where countries gradually reduce the use of dollars and euros in their trade. This does not happen abruptly, but as a natural reaction to changes in the global economy. Instead of being completely reliant on foreign currencies, countries are increasingly using their own money for international transactions. This helps reduce dependence on the dollar and euro and lessens the impact of external factors on each country's economy. Gradually, transactions in local currencies are becoming more popular in global trade, as countries aim to strengthen their financial independence and make their economies less vulnerable to global changes. The use of the yuan in different countries. An expert mentioned that the yuan is a strong and stable currency, with which you can buy just about any goods around the world. This is making the yuan increasingly popular for international transactions, and its use in other countries has noticeably grown. One of the main reasons for this is the massive scale of the Chinese economy, which plays an important role in global trade. Many countries are actively collaborating with China, and trade with it is becoming an important part of their foreign economic relations. The expert also noted that, according to data from the first quarter of this year, the growth rates of China's foreign trade are noticeable worldwide. This confirms the stability of its position on the global stage. Strong economic indicators from China are boosting confidence in the yuan. The more trust there is in a currency, the more it's used in international deals. This, in turn, leads to an even greater rise in the popularity of the yuan in global trade. The process of internationalizing the yuan. In addition, the expert emphasized that the Chinese government is actively promoting the process of internationalizing the yuan, aiming to make it an important currency in the global economy. To do this, China has signed currency swap agreements with several countries. A currency swap is a financial agreement between two countries, which allows them to exchange their national currencies under pre-agreed terms. These deals help strengthen trade and economic relations between countries, reducing dependence on the dollar or euro. Thanks to these swaps, Chinese companies and their foreign partners can settle transactions in yuan and local currencies, bypassing the need to use third currencies like the dollar. This makes trade and investment involving China a lot easier. So, the role of the yuan in global trade is becoming increasingly significant. As a result of these efforts, many countries that previously relied on the dollar for international transactions with China now prefer the yuan. The values of the dollar, euro, and yuan in the financial system. Even though China is actively working to reduce its dependence on the dollar, it's still too early to talk about completely getting rid of this currency. In recent years, there has indeed been a trend towards a reduced role for the dollar, especially as more countries start using the yuan in trade with China. You can not only use the yuan to pay for goods, but also to make investments, which makes it increasingly attractive on the international stage. What do you think? However, despite this progress, the dollar and euro still hold a significant share of the international financial system. These currencies remain important for most countries, and their complete displacement will take time. For now, dependence on the dollar is gradually decreasing, but a complete break from it is unlikely to happen anytime soon. Yes, China is actively trying to reduce its dependence on the dollar, and in recent years, the yuan has indeed become more in demand in international transactions. However, despite these steps, China still largely uses the dollar and euro for trade operations and investments with most countries. These currencies continue to dominate in China's international financial transactions. Even though the yuan is gradually strengthening its position, China's dependence on the dollar and euro remains significant. The country's foreign trade and investments are still mainly conducted in US dollars and euros. And this trend is unlikely to change anytime soon. US-China relations. But what about the countries themselves? Are China and the US friendly? US-China relations are among the most significant diplomatic, political, and economic ties in the world. China and the US are each other's second-largest trading partners. And in 2012, the trade volume between these countries reached an impressive $500 billion. However, trade between the countries is marked by a significant deficit for the US. In 2012, it was $315 billion. In addition, China is the largest holder of American debt. And by 2016, that amount reached $1,300 billion. The annual exchange of people between the countries is also significant. About 3 million people cross the Pacific Ocean, and there are over 100 flights between the countries every week. In the field of education, the interaction is also quite active. In 2011, about 120,000 Chinese students were studying in the US, while over 20,000 Americans were in China. The trade war between the US and China. In 2018, the trade war between the US and China started to pick up steam. One of the key events was when US President Donald Trump imposed high tariffs on Chinese goods, which seriously escalated tensions between the two largest economies in the world. In December 2019, Trump announced a partial trade deal with China, where the US lowered some of the tariffs that had already been imposed and canceled the planned increase on new goods. This was the first step toward easing the conflict. However, the war continued on other fronts. In August 2018, Trump banned American officials from using Chinese gadgets. In particular, devices from the company Huawei were considered a threat to national security. A year later, Huawei was added to the blacklist of companies, which severely limited its ability to do business with American companies. One of the most high-profile events was the arrest of Huawei's CFO, Meng Wanzhou, in Canada in December 2018 at the request of the US. She was accused of violating sanctions against Iran and conducting illegal financial transactions through the British bank HSBC. This arrest became a symbol of the escalating struggle between the US and China on the political and economic fronts. The trade war also affected broader aspects of economic relations. In August 2020, Trump stated that under certain conditions, he was ready to completely halt economic cooperation with China. He emphasized that the American economy is suffering because of Beijing's actions, and if necessary, the US is ready to separate from China if it doesn't change its behavior. I can't believe it! Wow! Accusation of China for engaging in unfair trade practices. In February 2021, US President Joe Biden accused China of engaging in unfair trade practices and violating human rights in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. A few months later, in October, the Chinese ambassador to the US, Qin Gang, made a call to the Washington government. He suggested establishing a peaceful dialogue and ending the economic and political standoff. He emphasized that China prefers to resolve international issues without conflicts, and that's their top priority. Just 2 days later, at an important meeting in Washington, U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai presented a new plan for trade relations with China. In this regard, the possibility of negotiations with Chinese representatives on compliance with the trade agreement that was concluded back in 2020 was proposed. The U.S. was even willing to lift tariffs on some Chinese goods, but at the same time, they didn't rule out the possibility of imposing new sanctions if necessary. Human rights issues as a source of disagreements between the U.S. and China. The U.S.-China Statement of October 29, 1997 identified human rights as one of the major issues between the U.S. and China. However, the parties agreed to maintain intergovernmental dialogue on this issue, and by 2015 the 19th round of such negotiations had already taken place. Despite this, the issue of human rights remains a serious sticking point between the two countries. During U.S. President Barack Obama's visit to China in 2009, Obama emphasized the values the two countries share, such as respect for family and a belief in the importance of education and hard work. However, he also openly discussed issues of democracy and human rights with Chinese President Hu Jintao. However, even years after that visit, in 2011, the U.S.-China statement still mentioned human rights as a source of serious disagreements. U.S.-China relations are not just about the economy and trade, but also about a delicate political balance, where the key players remain the yuan and the dollar. China is working hard to reduce its dependence on the American currency, aiming to promote the yuan as an important tool in international transactions. but also a delicate political balance, where the key players remain the yuan and the dollar. China is working hard to reduce its dependence on the US currency, seeking to promote the yuan as an important instrument in international payments. The trade war, sanctions, human rights issues, and diplomatic standoff are only adding to the tensions between the US and China, making the future of their relationship increasingly unpredictable. If you enjoyed this video and want to be part of the team that creates such exciting projects, here's your chance. I'm looking for creative people who have skills in video editing, work with graphics or voiceovers, or write interesting scripts. If you're interested, message the Telegram bot. The link is in the description, and let's create content together that captivates and inspires.